What's going on, guys? I'm absolutely caffeinated right now, so this should be a pretty sick video. But basically, I'm making it just because I've realized there's so many kids that are talking about the matrix, right? Or there's so many kids that are criticizing society and saying we want a lifestyle which society doesn't produce. What that boils down to is young people understanding that societal influence is very much real and that it also isn't consistently in the individual's own best interest, right? But I think as young people, we often fall short because we turn to blaming the society instead of understanding that despite of these societal influences, the responsibility ultimately does fall on us, right? If you choose to conform and that's at the sake of your own individuality, that was weakness on your part in that moment, right? And our own perception of these forces is really projection of our own inadequacy or lack of personal development. So the purpose of this video is to show you guys that, yes, it is possible to overcome this society. You need to stop making excuses. We're going to show how to overcome the society, why you should do so, and how to create a vision for yourself and actually be able to implement it, right? So I think as young people growing up in the world, growing up in the West, a lot of us start to figure out that society has a plan for us, right? But I think that this plan is a lot less like the Matrix, right? Which wants to control and enslave you, all that good stuff. I think it's a lot more like something that I deem the default mode network. Say you ground yourself in your own goals, your own autonomy, your own individuality. In that moment, you have your own roots and you're grounded, right? But if you do nothing, if you choose no fate, you float down a river. You're carried down that river and you're carried towards the default outcomes, right? So towards the default roles, behaviors, and ultimately outcomes which society produces at the default level, right? So through this network of societal influence, if you do nothing, you're carried down the default. And this is why you see so much patterns and so much mediocrity in society. It's not because, society just is so oppressive against the individual. It's that the individual is so weak and he chooses to do nothing, therefore he ends up at the default mode, right? And many of us figure out, hey, we don't want to go down this path. We don't want to be taken down this river. And we might see this when we're examining a particular career trajectory, or even when we're just questioning, the essence of like corporate jobs in general. But I think this really goes beyond that. A lot of people right now are coming to this insight because they're unplugging themselves from mainstream culture for a second and they're reflecting on what mainstream culture is actually doing for them, right? So by mainstream culture, I just mean the common modes of thinking, the common behavior patterns, the common consumerism, as in what people are consuming, choosing to consume, as well as just the common worldview that emerges from being in that mainstream culture, right? So when you take a step back from it, you realize that our desires, our curiosities, our own inclinations, right? They're often quite different from that of the mainstream culture. So ultimately, that culture doesn't really serve us. And you can come to the same realization by going through the educational system. Because as individuals, we all have intellectual curiosities. We all have talents. We all have knowledge that we want to acquire. We all have things that we want to develop. And if you've been successful in doing that, you would realize that that has happened because of vigorous self-direction, right? It didn't happen because you were just led down that path in the default mode of the educational system. No, you achieved it yourself. Similarly, you could even apply this to art, right? If you ever flip on the TV and you see Jimmy Fallon and you go, why is Jimmy Fallon here? Who is Jimmy Fallon for, right? If you're watching this video, chances are Jimmy Fallon isn't for you, right? It's called the mainstream media for a reason. Even the art we produce, the TV shows, the movies, especially celebrity gossip, celebrity worship, political pandering on either side. All this is the mainstream and it's all there for a reason. But you yourself, you might look at it and be so disconnected from it. You feel like you have nothing to do with it and you want to rally against it, right? But this really brings me to my point. It's that, yes, it's absolutely true that the environment exerts tremendous influence over the subject, right? But if you actually think about it, this is the most liberal time and place in our human history, right? This is where you really have opportunity to think and act how you choose to think and act. And that's because right now, I think we have the most availability to impactful resources, right? So things that can really make a difference in our lives, we have a access to as sort of the average people. We're not living in a feudal land, right? For example, like throughout history, where the media, for example, would be curated by the monarchy. And we're not living in communist Russia, where forget about owning a business, your job is decided by the state. So you can choose how you want to live right now in our society right now. And of course, society pushes and pulls on our individuality. That's what societies do, and that's what they've always done. But ultimately, if we fail to be our own individual selves, that's our fault. That's not society's fault, right? So I want to break down a force that supposedly is so powerful that it inhibits us. But I want to show you guys how this force still leaves enough room on the table for us to overcome it, right? So what I'm going to be talking about is what a lot of people deem maybe wokeism, cancel culture, political correctness, all these things, right? Whatever name you want to use. I'm going to use this example to show that this supposedly powerful force is just an illusion, that its power is there because of weak individuals. Weak individuals make it look powerful. So there's a group of people of convicted thought. They're convicted because they believe that society is mainly the reflection of unfair power balances, which they will do anything to disrupt. There's something in the air, basically, that's making individuals extremely cautious to speak their mind, and especially on certain topics. So I would want to do a thought experiment. Do you think that these people who are supposedly censored, do you think that these same people would still struggle to find their speech if they held values that they believe in? What I mean is that the people you're currently not supposed to oppose, the people that are supposedly all virtuous and all their beliefs line up with the current beliefs of the society, I would argue that these people aren't virtuous at all, because they don't sacrifice anything to bring forth this virtue, which of course shows that that virtue is artificial. But if you're a person that has a real value that you want to stand up for, something that you actually believe in, you are willing, or you should be willing, to sacrifice something to say it, because that value is supposed to transcend yourself. It's supposed to be greater than yourself, so you're willing to sacrifice for it. And even with thought, right? If you develop your thought, you know where it stands in the contemporary understanding. So you're able to be at ease to share it because you know the contents or the context as well of that thought. So this is my larger point about conformity, not just in speech and in thought, but also in general, conformity in general. Conformity is easy. You don't actually have to do anything yourself to conform, because the frontier has already been broken. All you have to do is mimic the other people around you. The work is done for you. And inversely, humans are actually opposed to conformity. So in that sense, conforming is difficult, because not only do you need to find an alternative to the society, but you need to be fine with being sort of an outsider, right? You don't reap the rewards and the safety of being in the in-group. So in that sense, it's difficult, but think about it. Conforming, when you choose to conform, you only gain a quick win. Whereas if you keep making that perpetual choice to conform, your spirit will die a slow death, and I'll explain why. The only way to live a meaningful life, in my view, is to choose not to conform, to live on your own terms, which are authentic and personalized to yourself. Whereas if you consistently conform, that basically adds up. That basically compounds. And throughout the course of your life, you're choosing to live on others' terms. And those terms become steeper and steeper until you basically unravel. The way to avoid this is by choosing yourself, fighting for yourself. Having those instances where you can choose to conform, and you might feel the pressure too, but you don't, in order to develop yourself. It's possible to not conform. The point is that the society is still extremely liberal in allowing you the opportunity to be an individual. It's just, I feel like the misconception that people have is not understanding that it is, however, still a society. It's not there to uphold you individually, it's there to uphold itself. So to walk your own path, you need to be qualified. And qualified people are convicted people. People who believe in something so much that conformity can't stop them. It's not even an option to them. If you don't, and this is a big part. If you don't hold on to your autonomy, systems, rightfully so, dictate your role and dictate your outcome. And that's because a society needs a degree of stability and repeatability of outcomes. But I think that we live in a noble enough system where you're allowed to reinvent yourself. You're allowed to innovate. It's just that there is a default. There is the crowd of average people. And to embody the alternative life to those people, you need to figure things out in a substantial enough way. What society is doing is it's filtering out people. It's qualifying people. Just like you will speak your mind if you have something real to say, you can escape, tangibly speaking, this is very tangible, you can escape a corporate or otherwise soul eroding job. And the way you do that is by evolving or becoming good enough or becoming a true alternative in the money-making arena. So there's plenty of opportunities to make money in different ways than have been traditionally accessible in the society. And the reason you need to be the default, the reason that you need to have the corporate job, the only reason is that you're not good enough or you haven't advanced your understanding in the money-making arena to be an alternative. And in the same way, you can be a creative, but as a creative, you have that spark, that creative spark in your mind, which is so transparent to you. But what you need to do is evolve and grow that creative spark so that it's so large that when you produce your art, people see that creative spark in your art. One more good example, if you want to be someone who exists in a relationship, right? That's different than the typical relationships that we have. Different than the default. You need to be a true alternative. You need to become somebody who your partner is going to treat differently than the default person because you're so obviously an alternative. You're so obviously better. If you think about it, there's all these ways to get paid, all these ways to change yourself. You have all this freedom to become the person who you want to be. You have all this access to resources to learn. So what's stopping young people from achieving this? And I would say there are some real threats. Basically, throughout time, individuals were forced to face their thoughts. And in doing so, you faced yourself, you faced your reality. Think about it. In moments of silence, despair, boredom, the individual typically faced his reality, reflected on who he was. But now, any dull moment can be smoothed over with an unconscious stream of ever-changing, reality-warping matrix of media. Any chance where we would have a quiet moment where for once our innermost thoughts begin to creep out of their hibernation, they are startled half to death by the obnoxious blaring of what is an absurd medium. And if you didn't catch that, I'm talking about TikTok and its contemporaries. These things are absurd. Their consumption doesn't advance the society, and their consumption also doesn't provide meaning or advance the individual. And in that sense, they're a completely absurd media. And of course, they're most powerful when they combine their effect with our natural human nature. And our human nature, combined with this new media and this new technology, forbids us to sit in our own despair. Like a drug, any quick hit suffices, right? So you have access to something at all times, right? And also like a drug, the longer we run from the feelings of despair that haunt our lives, and we escape through unearned highs, the more the reciprocal lows will follow us, right? So you have access to something that will distract you in a perfect way, and you just need to be susceptible to that for one moment in your day, just weak enough for one moment in the day for that thing to completely distract you, right? And the moment that it distracts you is the moment where there was something powerful that was going to happen, because your own psyche, through dread, wants to warn you. It wants to show you where you should be headed and where you're getting derailed. So you had a chance to orient your life, but because these new technologies are ultra available, you never get that chance to orient yourself. And for that reason, something like this is rightfully a threat, because it inhibits the solution. It stops the method of overcoming the society, because the method of overcoming the society is becoming an individual. It's forming a iron individuality. And why is this important, right? It's because as a fully formed individual, you're able to resist the comforts of conformity. And you do that through experiencing a superior experience. You're experiencing a pursuit of personal purpose. And those who walk their own path would never turn away from the beauty it offers and turn back and trade that in for the ugliness of conformity. And the reason why is because this life will undoubtedly require sacrifice. You may have heard the phrase, we must all suffer from one of two pains, the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. And this is true, but I'm speaking about the sacrifice of bearing responsibility compared to the sacrifice of bearing responsibility that we choose, right? So responsibility that just arises from living in a society versus the responsibility that you chose yourself. And the difference boils down to, as said by Friedrich Nietzsche, he who has a why to live can bear almost any how. So the price to live in a society may be that you need to earn enough money to sustain yourself. And so you work a job to do so. And the sacrifice in this case isn't the job in itself. It's the lack of meaning a job that's based only on income imposes on the individual, right? But on the other hand, the responsibilities that come about from following our inner self actually form the journey, which will be understood by ourselves as ultimately fulfilling, right? So it's really a question of meaning, because say you're a person who's an explorer, and in front of you is an uncharted territory, a mountain that you must climb. The actual journey up the mountain will not only be tolerable, it's going to be enjoyable, because that journey has meaning. But if I told another man, hey, climb up this mountain, and he asks me why, and I said, just do it, the actual journey, and by this I mean the day-to-day of our lives, without meaning is not worth living. And this really comes to a meeting point about the discussion with conformity, because in order to escape conformity, in order to resist it, we need to consistently follow our own path, because that effect compounds. So we will, over time, develop ourselves. And soon our experience will be so superior to the default choice, we will never want to conform to the default choice ever again. However, choosing again and again to conform compounds as well and robs ourselves of achieving our full potential. So of course the default seems better and better as the current version of ourselves becomes suckier and suckier. So the problem is that in the beginning, when we start our journey, we can't see our full potential. And because of that, we conform because we do not have a meaningful alternative to the default. That means that in order to resist conformity, we need to form a vision of ourselves. We need to understand what we ought to pursue, what we're curious about, what we desire, and especially what we're talented in. And this relates to the advice that's often espoused by older people telling younger people to try many things, because soon enough you won't be able to try as much as you can right now in this period of your life. And that's why this new technology, this things like TikTok and anything else that you might use to distract yourself, this is so dangerous, because it may completely derail that process of finding your vision and of walking your own path. And at least, if not derail, it's going to slow you down, right? The reason why is because you require some degree of isolation in order to intimately know yourself. So that's not possible if you're constantly in the presence of other people. And if you're someone who's extremely social, I do mean isolation literally, because a person that's very social begins to blend the consciousness of the sea of other people around them with their own consciousness. So the values of the collective start to become the values that you hold in your own consciousness, and the focus of the collective starts to become your own focus. And you're not able to differentiate the two. But this is especially true, or it also applies just as much to people who distract themselves, right? So you could distract yourself from using drugs compulsively. You can distract yourself from using these technologies, which basically are so effective at distracting yourself and pulling you away from the purpose of your life. that you're never going to be able to know yourself. You're never going to be figured out what it is that you're going after. You're never going to be able to set goals for yourself. This even applies to a person with a cluttered mind, because if you have a cluttered mind, how are you ever going to have a thought pattern that leads to a singular focus and a concise goal-making mechanism, right? So again, the person who has a why to live can bear almost any how. You need to have clarity on what your why is. And the first step to overcoming society is creating a personal vision which expands on who you truly are. And in that sense, you can take up goals that are in line with your own vision. Because if you're just someone who despises the status quo, doesn't like the way things are going in your life because of the influence of societal forces, and you just seek random self-improvement, the outcomes which you deem to be so inadequate in society will still find you. And the reason why is because you're going to fail, or it's going to be very difficult for you to become a true alternative. And that's because you have no real advantage, versus what you should be doing is tapping into your personal unfair advantage. And that's going to propel you way past the defaults. So you have to choose yourself, fight for yourself, for the best version of yourself, because that's what is balance. That's what's going to lead to a balanced and meaningful life. Because society is unbalanced. It's constantly changing and evolving. And if you choose to conform yourself to that, you're conforming yourself to something that isn't personalized also. Its goals, its values are not your values. It's the society's own values. Finding meaning is going to be inherently unstable and unsustainable. My message basically is choose yourself. Don't conform at the sake of your individuality. Develop yourself. Don't suck. Be good enough to be an alternative to the system. And we'll go more into these topics: conformity, fate, finding purpose, being an individual. Just let me know what you guys want to see. I'm extremely open. I want to hear what you guys say, and be on the lookout for a school community as well, because I want to build a community of like-minded individuals to collaborate and basically work together. But yeah, that's basically it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you gained something from this, and yeah, be on the lookout.